So we are all set. So like Miranda said, I am in the Wellness and Work Life office. I'm a program coordinator and have a background in sport and performance psychology and resilience training with athletes, soldiers in the U.S. Army, and as well as employees, just like you. So today we're going to be talking about resilience and more specifically, catastrophic thinking. Has everyone seen the presentation?
Yes, it's good now.
Okay, all right. So as I was saying, sorry about that. Let me just get situated. I thought I was sharing my window, and I think now I was sharing my actual screen.
I see the slides now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about catastrophic thinking and resilience. This is the third class in a series of classes on resilience. We will discuss and review resilience. So if you weren't able to come to our other classes or sign on to them in the last couple months, you will not be lost. You will not have missed anything. Those are recorded and on our YouTube channel if you are interested in going back and watching those. But today you will be right on track with everybody else. So let's talk about catastrophic thinking. What comes to mind when you either think of catastrophic thinking or you experience this phenomenon? Drop it in the chat. Let's get some words that you maybe associate with it, or feelings, thoughts that you may have around catastrophic thinking. Okay, Paige says, like, failure, thinking I have failed, the sky is falling, worst case scenario about an event, panic from whatever has gone wrong, self-doubt, the worst that's happening, overwhelming fear, negativity. Definitely. And this is just getting the conversation going. So let's hear some more word associations or things that you think of when you think of or experience catastrophic thinking. This is something that people will experience differently depending on how they react to certain situations or experiences that they've had in the past. So there's no necessarily like wrong answer. So I see a couple more coming through. Everything is out of control. It's over with. Spiraling. That's a great one, and we will talk about that. That is directly related to catastrophic thinking. Susan said leading to anxiety and depression, worst case scenario, extreme anxiousness. Yes, absolutely. If anything else comes to mind, feel free to drop it into the chat. But this is a great way to start the conversation on catastrophic thinking, things that are going to be, getting in the way of your clear thoughts, seeing no way out of a situation. Someone said up a creek without a paddle. Definitely. That gives you a good visual of what it might feel like to be in that catastrophic thinking mode. When I think of catastrophic thinking, I think of maybe some irrational fear, anxiety, maybe a little bit of like exaggeration on the situation that's happening, or potential things that may happen from the situation that I'm in. I'm also thinking of worst case scenario. We can also think of catastrophic thinking as like making a mountain out of a molehill. So we see this situation that is before us or that we're experiencing that may if we zoom out, be really small, but in the moment, it is a massive mountain. Um, so a couple of things that I also think of are something like this. Like I send a text message that I'm worried about sending, and then my brain is saying, okay, now we just wait. And then I look, for a response, maybe 2 minutes, maybe even like 30 seconds, and say, okay, they haven't responded yet. My brain is already saying they hate us. I'm already jumping to the worst case scenario or the thing that's not going well at all. Something that may really resonate with you is getting a text or an email that says, like, do you have a minute to talk? I have actually had to tell my mom not to text me this, be a little bit more specific when she's texting me and she wants me to call her, she wants to call, because um, this just this produces so many thoughts to the worst case, or just a spiral downward of what do they want to talk to me about. And this relates to not only personal, conversations that you may be having, but it could also relate to the workplace. If your boss comes in and says, hey, I want to talk to you later on, and then they don't give you anything else in terms of details or like a topic they want to talk to you about, that can help you spiral downward and think of the worst case scenario and that catastrophic thinking. So hopefully that resonates with you, and you're kind of in that, you get a little bit more of an understanding of what catastrophic thinking may entail. More formally, catastrophic thinking or catastrophizing is wasting critical energy ruminating about the rational and or irrational worst case outcomes of a situation. And we talk about rational and irrational worst case outcomes because sometimes our brain goes to the most irrational outcome, where when we are able to look back or reflect on that moment, we know that what we were thinking in the moment was absolutely irrational and would have never happened. But there are also a lot of times where we do experience certain situations and we have to think of the worst case scenario that actually is realistic and rational. So we don't want to necessarily say that we're always blowing something out of proportion when we're thinking of catastrophic thinking, or we're ruminating on something. It can potentially be rational. And in the moment, everything feels rational. Everything feels like a possibility, which is why it's not necessarily a great thing to catastrophize about everything, because we're not allowing ourselves to take purposeful action. So in this definition, we see wasting critical energy, ruminating about the rational or irrational worst case outcomes of a situation. But that wasting critical energy is extremely important because it's not allowing us to think clearly and efficiently or effectively about whatever is happening, whatever that situation is. We're wasting critical energy, or we may even be paralyzed by the situation, thinking about all the things that could go wrong or are going wrong. And we're not able to take that purposeful or effective action to deal with the situation in the moment. So we can also think of catastrophizing or catastrophic thinking as dwelling on something, missing that critical information to help us attack the situation. We're stuck in the moment when we're not really sure exactly what to do. So we end up doing something that's either wasting that energy or doing nothing at all. So there are a couple different styles of catastrophic thinking that can occur, and you may experience all three of these styles. You may experience just one of these styles if you tend to be a catastrophic thinker in certain situations. The first is downward spiral. So this is where a situation happens, and from this situation, you're experiencing in the moment, you are telling yourself a story about the situation, about all the outcomes, and it is literally like a downward spiral. It just builds off of each other. It's all connected, and then it typically ends in the absolute worst case scenario. The second catastrophic thinking style is scattershot. So this is where you're having just like random thoughts about the worst case scenario, but they're not really related. So you could be thinking about, you could be experiencing a situation. Maybe you told your friend that you were going to meet at this coffee shop at 11 and it's noon and you still haven't heard anything from them. It's not like them. So maybe you're thinking, one worst case scenario about them potentially getting into a car accident, and then one worst case scenario about them, fighting with a spouse and maybe getting a divorce. So they're not necessarily related, but they are typically like worst case scenarios that, that probably isn't the case that's happening. And then the third catastrophic thinking style is circling. So this is where you're really ruminating on one or two thoughts over and over again, and you just cannot get those two thoughts out of your head. And again, these are all thinking styles that do not allow you to take purposeful action. So you can see if you're downward spiraling, in a situation, your catastrophic thinking is just going deeper and deeper into that worst case scenario. You're not able to look at the situation for just the facts and take that purposeful action to problem solve. If you're thinking about all of the different things that could be happening in a scattershot thinking style, that aren't really related, but they're typically the worst case scenario, you're still wasting your time, coming up with all of these things that aren't allowing you to solve the problem at hand or get to the bottom of whatever is happening. And then lastly, ruminating on that one thing is not allowing you to focus on the problem and take that action. And so I will say that as we're talking about catastrophic thinking, this is not the same thing as contingency planning. So you may think to yourself, if I'm thinking about the worst case scenario or all the possibilities that could be happening in a situation, I'm just planning myself for the worst, and I'm going to be ready then, for whatever is going to happen. And even if I know that that specific outcome, that's the worst case, isn't going to happen, I'm going to be ready for anything else. Contingency planning or planning for something that could potentially happen is definitely beneficial, especially when you're planning some kind of event or you have that control over a situation. Catastrophic thinking is not the same thing. Catastrophic thinking is in the moment. It's not necessarily controllable. There's no direction or focus to this type of planning or thinking about the worst case scenario. And more often than not, those catastrophic thoughts are going to cause certain physical and emotional or psychological effects within your body and your mind. So when a situation arises, depending on the situation, the information that's available to us and how we interpret that situation, we have those physical and emotional reactions within ourselves that are created by our autonomic nervous system. So I'm sure you've all heard of the fight or flight system. The autonomic nervous system is actually kind of like a balance system. So on one side, we have the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, and on the other side, we have the parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest nervous system. So I'm sure everybody's heard of fight or flight. You kind of know what that is. When you perceive a threat, you are experiencing a lot of different physical and emotional reactions in that fight or flight mode. On the opposite side of that, if the fight or flight is not active, the rest and digest system, or the parasympathetic nervous system, is active, which means that you are experiencing almost the opposite effects of what you would feel in fight or flight. So we're going to talk about a little bit about those details now so that we can start building awareness of what it feels like and what it may affect in our bodies and our minds, our ability to think and problem solve, so that when we're experiencing that catastrophic thinking, we're understanding everything that's going on. We're able to use a technique that we'll talk about a little bit later to actually pull ourselves out of that catastrophic thinking, out of those worst case scenario thoughts, and attack the problem in the most effective way. So when we're experiencing that fight or flight, our pupils are going to dilate. Our mouth might get dry because we're trying to conserve as much resources as possible into our bodies. So our digestion is shutting down as well. Our airways are dilated to get as much oxygen as possible into our brain, our blood, our muscles. So if we're ready to literally fight or flight, we're ready to do that. With that, our muscles are going to constrict and tighten. A bunch of other things are going on as we're experiencing a fight or flight, which could potentially happen when we have these catastrophic thoughts, or a situation arises that we are just on that downward spiral, or we're ruminating on something that's just not going well, and we're kind of fueling the fire. This we can think of as chaotic and energy wasting. And it absolutely gets in the way of our ability to think clearly, intake all the information necessary to understand the problem, and then attack the problem in the most effective way as problem solving. So what we really want to see is that cool, calm, collected, and confident self with the parasympathetic nervous system. We're relaxed, our muscles are not tense, our airways are clear, but they're not dilated, our heartbeat is slow, and everything is just actively working as it needs, but we're not wasting that energy on all of those processes like we would in fight or flight. If we experience fight or flight in a long term, so if we're catastrophizing about every situation, or we tend to catastrophize more often than not over certain situations, we are going to experience a lot of long-term effects, especially when we think about being purposeful in our actions and problem solving. So some of those long-term effects are going to be creating high levels of anxiety. That tension and tightness that we may feel in our muscles will be there more long-term. That can get in the way of our ability to sleep and get restful sleep. It can also have more serious heart risk implications, heart disease. It can mess up our digestion. It can help decrease our focus and increase helplessness or hopelessness in certain situations. And that's where I know some people have already mentioned in the chat that when they think of catastrophizing, they think of a lot of anxiety and depression. And that's where, if we're experiencing catastrophic thinking or always thinking of the worst case scenario, that's where depression may start to develop, or things aren't as easily digestible. So all of these effects, our ability to think logically, flexible, problem solve. It also affects our relationships and our ability to interact with others. If you think of somebody who is always thinking of the worst case scenario, and if that's not you, you may not want to be around them all the time. If that's that negative bias, that can absolutely affect your ability to maintain relationships. So we have one question. freeze in effect as well. Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer questions as best I can along the way. Christine asked, is freeze an effect as well? If I'm understanding your question correctly, the flight, fight, or freeze, yes, absolutely. We often hear fight or flight and freeze as part of that sympathetic nervous system response. Freeze is absolutely part of catastrophic thinking. That's exactly what we say when we mean that we're wasting critical energy, ruminating on something, and we're not actually able to take action. That is literally that freeze moment of, I'm thinking about all the worst case scenario outcomes, and I'm not taking any action at all. I'm not doing anything. So yes, great question. If anyone else has any questions, absolutely put them in the chat as we go along. So understanding why we may catastrophize or have this catastrophic thinking is extremely important, because we often think of catastrophizing or thinking of the worst case scenario as something that is 100% controllable. We want to think of our thoughts as controllable, but oftentimes when situations happen, they happen so quickly, and we have these subconscious or heat of the moment thoughts that they don't feel as controllable. And then if we're not able to pull ourselves out of that moment of that downward spiral or that circling ruminating, it can feel really uncontrollable. And sometimes catastrophic thinking happens because of things that are outside of our control. So when a situation is ambiguous, something you value is at stake, you're kind of feeling run down or depleted, maybe you didn't get enough sleep for the week, and you're not at 100% rested and rejuvenated. If you're in a situation that you're already fearful or anxious about, or it's your first time doing something, this can put you in a situation where catastrophic thinking is more likely to happen because of that fight or flight natural and subconscious survival tactic. Fight or flight, or being in that sympathetic nervous system response, is actually from when we were living on the land and we needed to hunt and gather for our food, and there were threats that we had to deal with every single day. So when our ancestors were living like that, they had developed the ability to look for physical threats and see what may be actually threatening their lives on a daily basis. And so when something was deemed a threat, they had this response of, okay, I need to fight or flight in this situation to survive. We have that ability still for a fight or flight, but thankfully we don't fear for our lives on a daily basis. Most of the time when we're in that fight or flight situation, it's just a perceived threat that we have, and that triggers that physical and emotional response from the flight or fight response. So another way that catastrophic thinking may occur is confirmation bias and the need for control. So another natural human tendency is to seek out information that aligns with our initial assessment of a situation. So if we have a heat of the moment thought about something, or an initial impression about something or someone that we meet for the first time, we are looking for other information that confirms our initial thought or our initial impression of someone or something. That's just a human tendency that we all have, that's natural. And with that, if we have a job that we need to be ready for anything, or that we need to be in control of all the time, dealing with our families or taking care of our families, control is important in most situations. But if we have that need for control, in a way that's going to inhibit our flexibility or our ability to deal with something that occurs that we're not ready for, that's where catastrophic thinking comes into play and could potentially get in the way of you actually problem solving. And then lastly, past experiences in specific situations or the way you grew up, the way you were raised, all can contribute to our tendency to think catastrophically or experience certain situations that can cause catastrophic thinking. So understanding our past experiences will help us understand what drives our views or reactions of certain situations, and that can help us change or alter these views and reactions if they're not productive in the moment. So again, building self-awareness of why catastrophic thinking might happen just in general for human beings, and why it also might happen specifically for us is going to be step number one in stopping that catastrophic thinking and being able to take purposeful action. So that past experiences piece is really important because we never want to be surprised by our reaction to something. We never want to feel like we are totally lost and out of control in a moment, especially in the moment. So we can kind of think of our past experiences or building the self-awareness of understanding our origin story. So I want you to take a minute right now and think of your favorite superhero. If you're not into superheroes at all, that's okay. Think of the strongest person you know, either personally or someone famous that seems to be able to deal with anything that comes to their way. So take a minute to think of your favorite superhero. Put them kind of in front of you. You can close your eyes and picture them if you want. You can type it in the chat. The Hulk, Sandra, that's a good one. Okay, Wonder Woman. She's one of my favorites too. So once you have your superhero, think of their origin story. So what did they go through that created their identity? Take a minute to think about the experiences that they had, what they had to deal with physically, maybe emotionally. And if you're not into the superhero theme, think about the person that you pictured in front of you, who you know personally, or someone else, like a celebrity. Think about what they went through, maybe how they grew up, that kind of pushed them to be the person that they are. So hopefully you all have kind of an idea of the origin story of this person, this really strong person, whether or not they're fictional. We all can see that through experiences like Iron Man. Iron Man and Wonder Woman are two of my favorite superheroes, but for Iron Man, he was captured by a group of terrorists and was badly injured, and then ended up creating this suit of armor and saving himself and surviving to become Iron Man. So experiencing something like a major event or trauma or something that they had to learn how to be strong in the moment, not only for themselves, but for others, allowed them to be resilient, right? And be the strongest person that you know, or the person that can save millions of lives in a superhero situation. Um, As a superhero, they also have to learn how to think of the worst case scenario in every situation. They have to be kind of wary of certain things or certain people, and they have to be ready for that fight mode all the time. But it works for them because they gain the extraordinary abilities or they experience some kind of supernatural phenomenon that allowed them to have that strength all the time and protect their people and themselves no matter what. So we can think of our own origin story and our own thinking patterns in the same way. What got us to this moment right here? What got us to our jobs, our families, our lives in this moment right now? So take just a quick moment to think back to a couple times maybe where you met a challenge or experienced something where you did catastrophize and think about what got you out of those moments. And it's important to understand our past experiences, our own origin story, to understand how we might catastrophize in the future, especially when we're thinking of that downward spiral, that scatter shot, that circling style of catastrophizing, because that's going to help us in the moment, in the future, pull ourselves out and be able to take action later on. So being able to learn from our experiences, learn from the ways that we think will allow us to act more productively as we reflect. So, and you can do this on your own, you can do this later on, but I really urge you to start building awareness of um, how you think, your thinking patterns, especially in situations where you are met with a challenge or a barrier or things are just not going right. And then asking yourself, is this effective in the moment? Is this something where I want to be more efficient or effective with my energy, where I could be a little bit better at problem solving or gathering all the information before I take action? Because yes, you can't change that moment now after the fact, but you can absolutely use it in the future to set yourself up for success and being at your best. So if we think of our own origin story, just like we think of our favorite superhero, why can't we just fight like they do, right? Why can't we just think about the worst case scenario all the time? Why might it paralyze us or create that fight or flight in a more negative way when we're constantly looking at the worst case scenario? What do superheroes have that we don't have? Unfortunately, they have superpowers that allow them to overcome any kind of obstacle or situation that comes their way. Um, while we don't have super strength or the ability to fly, the power of the cosmos, we do have the ability to build our resilience. So resilience is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, challenges, or change. It's a skill that we can deliberately practice, just like any other physical skill that we may have, or a mental skill that we may have. We want to be able to practice resilience through research-backed techniques that allow us to thrive rather than survive in certain situations. We also know that resilience is the pathway to consistent, excellent performance and that cognitive and emotional well-being that's going to allow us to be our best selves, not just in one situation or not just at work or not just at home, but in our entire lives. Because being able to put our best foot forward, even if we're not always at 100% of our best selves, we want to be able to give not only the situations or work or our families the best that we can in that moment, but we want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward, that we're proud of, and that we're living our lives in the way that we want to, rather than letting life kind of happen around us and whatever comes our way, we'll deal with in the moment. Because being able to have the ability to bounce back is going to help us whenever something comes up that's unexpected or that's not something we want to deal with, but we have to deal with. So a skill that we're going to talk about to practice resilience is called put it in perspective. And this is specific to that catastrophic thinking. So when you are experiencing catastrophic thinking or you're experiencing a style of catastrophic thinking in the moment, there is a way that you can pull yourself out of that thinking pattern and deal with the situation in a more efficient way. Because remember, catastrophic thinking is where we're wasting critical energy or we're stuck in the moment and we're not taking any action, or we're taking action and it's just not productive at all. So put it in perspective. We can also call it PIP. So PIIP. It's a skill that will help us stop catastrophic thinking in real time. It focuses on optimism and mental agility, being able to leverage positive emotions and undo all the effects that we've talked about emotionally and physically of catastrophic thinking, and being in that fight or flight mode. And then it allows us to see the situation a little more clearly so that we can attack the problem in the most productive way. And it also allows us to lower anxiety just a little bit to get all that information that I just discussed. And so we can take action. So the way we use this skill and practice this skill is ideally in real time. So if you're experiencing a situation that you notice that you're catastrophizing about in the moment, I would love for you to pull out the worksheet that I created for you. Miranda can drop it in the chat now. You can print it off. But oftentimes that's not the case. So you may not have time to go through this worksheet as you're experiencing the situation, as you're experiencing catastrophic thinking, but being able to reflect using this technique, using this worksheet, will also, again, allow you to set yourself up in the future to attack a problem head on and reduce that anxiety just a little bit to be able to look at the most likely situations that are going to happen and develop a plan. So the way we use PIP is in 5 different steps. So when a situation is ambiguous or you're dealing with a situation that's just creating a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of emotions that you're just not allowed to think clearly, you're going to describe the situation for what it is. You're going to look at the worst case scenarios that are going to happen, which are probably already part of your catastrophic thinking. You're going to think of the best case scenarios that are going to happen. And then that's going to allow you to identify the most likely situation or outcomes and then develop a plan from there. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to discuss each step in detail, and then feel free to work along within the worksheet, or like I said, use it however you choose later on. But I'm going to work through this with an example when I was catastrophic thinking in the moment and I was not able to take action. So I'm not sure if anyone else has dealt with or had dealt with the flight delays in, I believe it was 2022 around Christmas, the winter time, especially with Southwest. I was stuck in all of the middle of that. But if you don't remember that, I'll jog your memory a little bit. So there was a major snowstorm in December of 2022, and it caused a massive chain reaction of delayed flights and people either missing their connecting flights and getting stranded in their connection destination rather than their destination, and their bags being somewhere else, and just days were going by where people didn't know where their bags were. They were stuck in a completely different city and they weren't able to move because so many flights were being delayed. And so, like I said, I was stuck in the middle of that as well. I went to visit my family in New York for Christmas and had just a couple days with them. And was meant to fly out the day after Christmas, but because of all the flight delays, was not able to do that. So I was supposed to fly out really early on, I believe it was a Monday morning. And so Sunday night, I go in to check into my flight and I see that it's canceled. All it says is flight was canceled. No email, no text message, no, absolutely nothing. And so in the moment, I just kind of sat looking at my phone, thinking about all the things that could happen or be happening that's going to affect this. All the implications of my flight getting delayed. I was living in Florida at the time, so my dog was being boarded at a place down there. I had to be back at work on Tuesday morning. And I was just getting more and more anxious and in the moment, thinking about all of the things that were going to happen, spiraling literally downward with my thoughts and getting more and more riled up, figuring out what to do. And also just frozen in the moment. I was not taking any action at all. So, in this situation, as I'm catastrophizing, and if I was able to recognize this in the moment, I would want to first describe what's happening. So in step number 1, I'm describing just visiting my family. My flight was delayed the day after Christmas. My dog is being boarded and I was supposed to pick him up on Monday morning. And I'm stuck in New York on a Sunday night. Had to be back at work on Tuesday for important meetings. And I have no option to rebook at the current moment. So I'm just looking at the details. I'm just looking at the facts. I'm not attaching any kind of interpretation or anything to this step. I'm just describing the who, what, when, and where. Forget about the why right now. So once we describe what's happening in the situation, we're going to move to step number 2. So capturing the absolute worst case scenario, which is most likely already happening in the moment as you're catastrophizing. So understanding the different styles and what you may generally gravitate toward as a catastrophizing mindset, we're looking at, okay, what could be happening? In this situation for me, I'm thinking, well, this isn't real. I'm going to be stuck here for days. My dog is going to be stuck without food. I don't even know if they have room for him at the boarding place. If they don't have room for him, what am I going to do? They're going to put him outside on the street. My job is depending on me. And if I don't make it, I'm going to disappoint everyone. I have so much work to do to make up for this lost time. I'll never recover. What if I lose my job because I never recover? I disappoint everyone to the point where they're not going to help me out. My dog and I are going to be just lost without any money to live if I lose my job. Just continually capturing the worst case scenario. And it may, as we're doing this right now, it may feel like, okay, yeah, those aren't rational things. Like they're not, my dog's boarding place is not going to put him out on the street. But in the moment, like I said in the beginning, these are very real feelings, very real thoughts. So again, in the moment, getting them all out on paper, capturing the worst case scenario so they're not ruminating in your head and you're not circling around these certain or downward spiraling around these certain thoughts. You're getting them out on paper and you'll continue that until you reach a natural stopping point. Next is going to be step 3. But before you jump from worst case to best case, you're going to have a reset button. So if you've ever been in a situation and tried to try to have someone support you and they come back with, oh, well, it's not that bad, or they try to tell you like everything is going to be okay in that moment, that doesn't necessarily always help. So you need some kind of action or like a snap out of it kind of motion to allow you to then generate those best case scenarios. So before you jump from step 2 to step 3, you're going to hit the reset button mentally and physically, which looks like giving yourself a jolt of positive energy. This is going to help you pull out of that rumination, pull yourself out of that downward spiral. So you're going to think of what makes you laugh, think of what makes you smile, and have those things in your phone or in front of you in the moment to just get that quick burst of positivity. So on the worksheet, there is a spot where you can just jot a couple things down because again, in the moment, you're not going to want to be thinking about all the best things and all of the sunshine and rainbows and everything. But if you can give yourself a jolt of positivity in the moment, it's going to help you long term develop a plan to attack the problem. So, for example, for me, I like looking at like funny videos. Specifically, I don't know if you've ever seen like pandas like falling down or rolling around. So funny to me. If that's not your thing, you can sing your favorite song or watch your favorite comedian. Look at pictures of you and your family or you and your dog or cat. Something that makes you smile, something that makes you laugh, something that gives you that quick burst of energy or I see Miranda put something in the chat. Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Makes me laugh every time. But something that's going to give you that really quick hit of positive energy, and you want it to be personal. So you don't want to be scrolling on social media forever because again, you're in the moment, you're in this catastrophic thinking spiral. We need something quick and easy. And this is key because it allows for something called the undoing effect. So the undoing effect is literally undoing all of that physical and emotional effects of being in fight or flight or having that anxiety in you. That positivity, that jolt is going to literally undo all of those effects. So if you were thinking of all the worst case things that were happening and you felt tension and tightness and this helplessness that just felt like so heavy, and then you gave yourself this quick jolt of positivity, you're going to literally feel that undo. So you're going to feel your muscles relax a little bit. You're probably going to be smiling. And then that puts you in the best situation to continue with this positive thinking and generate the best case scenario. So to step 3, you're still thinking of best case scenario. You're still asking yourself, okay, what could happen on the best case? And to elicit more positive emotion, it doesn't need to be realistic. You can think of the most out of this world case scenarios because you know that next we're going to talk about most likely scenarios. So in my experience, catastrophic thinking with my flight being delayed, maybe I'm saying for the best case scenario, oh, Southwest is just kidding. They're going to send me an email and they're going to tell me like, haha, joke's on you. Merry Christmas for giving you $50 extra for your flight, and your flight is fine. Maybe they'll call me and say they booked me a private jet, and then it'll be a once in a lifetime experience for me, and I'll remember it forever. Or another best case scenario, I'm delayed, but I work so hard to get back to work as quickly as I can. That work's so impressed with me and my tenacity and positive attitude that they give me a raise or they promote me and give me an amazing bonus. Again, out of this world, kind of unrealistic situations, but it continues with that positive emotion so that we're continually pulling ourselves out of that downward spiral or out of those ruminations so that we can attack the problem to the best of our ability. So that's where we're going to start, identifying our most likely outcomes. So when we're in this situation, we are now in a better space to think about what is really going on. Let's gather all the actual details. Let's figure out what are the most likely outcomes, short-term and long-term, focusing on behaviors, emotions, events, and people that are going to help us develop a plan. So, for example, my flight's delayed because of the weather. I won't be back at my initial time. I may need to wait a couple more days to catch my flight, but I will be back. My dog may have to stay another night. And in terms of emotions, I'll be frustrated. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be stressed. So it doesn't need to be positive. We're just looking at all the most likely situation or outcomes that allows us to develop a plan to attack these outcomes. And in this step, it's really important for us not to start planning just yet. We have a tendency to look at, okay, the outcomes, but then saying something like, okay, I need to call Southwest right now. Let's develop the entire story for what it is before we develop a plan and take action. So once you have your long-term and short-term outcomes, you're going to develop a plan. Step 5. So you're going to focus on those most likely outcomes, and then you're also going to talk about or write down the steps that you need to take to deal with those outcomes. And then you're going to think about priority number 1. So you were in that catastrophic thinking. You gave yourself that jolt of positivity. You generated the best case scenarios, generated the most likely scenarios, and now you're absolutely ready to develop a plan. So for me, I wanted to call to rebook for Southwest. Maybe I'm chatting with them in the app or looking online to see if it's just Southwest or if it's other airlines as well. I'm looking at the weather to see any potential other storms that are going to affect the next couple days. And then I'm also writing down that I need to talk to the place that I'm boarding my dog at. I'm calling work or sending emails to make sure that everybody is aware of the situation and that I have a plan in place to deal with the situation. So then once you develop your plan fully to the most likely outcomes, then you can start taking action and you're going to feel more ready to take action, or you have the resources to take action because you're not in that downward spiral. You're not in that fight or flight or freeze mode anymore. You are ready to go. You have that confident, cool, calm, and collected mindset, and you have a plan to deal with that situation. So the goal with the put it in perspective technique, the goal to build resilience around situations that are out of our control or that come up when we're not expecting it, is to understand where we react in certain situations that may be helpful or unhelpful. We're building awareness and we're identifying our thought patterns based on previous experiences and based on natural human tendencies that we may have. And then we're also using that put it in perspective technique to lower anxiety just enough to accurately assess the situation and deal with it effectively. Putting it in perspective is not pretending that everything is good or it's fine. We're not denying real problems or taking away anxiety completely, because sometimes anxiety allows us to take action. We're just lowering it enough to think clearly about a situation, to get us out of that downward spiral, to relieve some of those effects that we may feel emotionally and physically from that fight or flight response, and allow us to practice that mental agility and problem solving effectively, so that we can be our best performers, we can be our best employees, our best parent or friend or son and daughter, put it in perspective, develop a plan for dealing with that is going to allow us also to build empathy for others, especially when they're catastrophizing, or you notice someone that you work with or that you have a personal relationship with are dealing with those catastrophic thoughts. We can then help them in those situations as well. It does look different for everybody, but being able to have that awareness of what it may look like and not jumping from, okay, let's be positive right now, will allow us to help them think rationally and develop a plan on their own. So that's all I have for you today. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. You can put them in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask live. I would love to answer any questions that you may have about anything. As a reminder, that worksheet is available for you to print out, share it with people, or work on it on your own, kind of like a journal reflection. And then we have one more Bring Out Your Resilience class. In this series, it's May 7th, Wednesday, 12 to 1, just like today. And we're going to be talking about character strengths.